Hey, Fiends of the Pod, it's your host, Nate Wyckoff, reminding you to like, subscribe, and share our content with your friends and family. Hey, even if you hate us, share us with your enemies. Also, go to cultandclassicfilms.com and cultandclassicfilms.com/subscribe so you can get our releases of amazing exclusive cult films on Blu-ray. Really cool stuff. You can get monthly shipments to your door so you can be the one of your friends that says, hey, I've seen a movie you haven't seen. It is a great, great honor. So thank you so much. And here's the episode. Welcome, friends and feeds, to a special episode of Cult and Classic Films podcast. I'm going to bring you two classic mini-sodes. We used to run mini-sodes occasionally on Fridays, and we still do. And they're usually things like movie reviews or product reviews that weirdos like us find interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and play these for you. Enjoy. And next week, we will be back with part 2 of Animals Behaving Badly, specifically Slaughterhouse from 2023.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends, to another mini-sode of Cult and Classic Podcast. These are the short, in-between main episode snippets that we bring you every Friday to tide you over until our next main episode, which always launches on Tuesday, and where we talk about two films, one mainstream and one cult, both of which share a thematic link. So today's mini-sode, we're going to do another Film in 5, which is a short film review of something that you guys might be interested in. And I'm excited about today's because it's a film that I always wanted to see, and I didn't get to see it in my youth. And now I have the power. It is Making Contact from 1985. Making Contact is an early film from director Roland Emmerich. May recognize Roland Emmerich's name from, well, I don't know, such little films as Independence Day and one of my favorites, Stargate. Many, many, many films that you know and love. And this one, you probably don't know. It has been re-released by Kino Lorber, I believe, as a great transfer of it. And it also is on, you can find it on VHS, you can find it everywhere. This is a really interesting little film. It falls into the category of kids films that are probably not appropriate for kids. It's got to be scary as hell. If I saw this when I was a wee lad, it would terrify me. Here's the plot. And it's a little all over the place, but it's very 80s, so we'll talk about it. The plot is that a young boy, Joey, has recently lost his father, and he's having trouble coping, or so everyone thinks. It also happens that Joey has psychic powers. He can move things with his mind a little bit, and there's just some weird stuff about him. For example, at home, he has a little toy robot, kind of like a mini R2-D2, that has a mind of its own. It literally is sentient, and it wanders around, and it's his friend, and he talks to it. We assume maybe at the beginning of this film, or the first half of this film, that the robot might just be part of this film's world. Like, oh, maybe anyone can buy this robot. But then his little friend sees it, and that is clearly not the case. So we don't know why this thing is sentient, if it's just part of Joey's powers, or if it's a different entity. We don't know. It doesn't matter. It's one of those fun little funky sci-fi elements in this movie. Now, the reason the movie is called Making Contact is because, as I said, Joey lost his father, but he starts getting phone calls from him on his toy phone at night, and he talks to him. Well, this coincides weirdly with when he went to the abandoned house that is essentially in his backyard, which actually is the Bates Motel from 1960 Psycho. For those of you with good eyes, you'll spot it. It's pretty obvious, actually, because it's spooky as heck. But he goes into this house and he finds a ventriloquist doll, which is spooky, spookier than Slappy from Goosebumps. It's just a weird looking ventriloquist doll. It belongs in Puppet Master rather than a kid's movie, but that's okay. He takes this home, and this thing starts to talk to him. It says that he's not talking to his father on the phone, but to the puppet's cruel dead master who wants to come back to life. And he says, don't talk to this guy. The kid says, but I want to talk to him because he's my dad, I think. And the puppet says, oh yeah. And the puppet starts making horrible things happen, like the door slamming shut and throwing things around and attacking Joey. The puppet's pretty powerful. I don't know if we're supposed to believe that maybe the puppet's telling the truth, but if we are, it doesn't last very long because the puppet looks evil, acts evilly, and speaks with an evil tone. So we know right away the puppet's no bueno. Um, so the kid who is ostracized because of his special powers ends up making a little friend, and then his powers are noticed by a local teacher who's trying to get with Joey's mom, and the government comes in. It's one of those movies, a very Spielbergian touch. In fact, this whole thing feels kind of like an early Spielberg movie. Like it fits alongside E.T., and it's clearly in that vein. The government shows up. They start to do tests, but because kids can come and go from a government research site, I guess, a bunch of the local kids planning to make fun of and torment Joey get stuck in a mystical labyrinth that is also inside the abandoned house in his backyard. His little girlfriend comes to say, hey, like these kids are trapped. And Joey's like, oh, even though they're mean to me, I gotta go save them. So he does. He goes and he fights the puppet with the help of the dead ventriloquist, who apparently used black magic in order to become a great ventriloquist and become very successful. And yeah, that's that. And then everything is good, kind of, except for the fact that Joey dies. Does he come back? Spoiler alert, yes, he wakes up. But it certainly is a very long moment before he does, making you think, is this not kids movie even more not kid friendly than I thought? So yeah, it's one of those. The great thing is the effects are fun. The vibe is super 80s. And interestingly enough, this film is mostly filmed in Germany, which makes sense because I believe that's where Roland Emmerich is from. But it was done in English and set in America specifically because he wanted it to be accessible to an American audience. And I think it probably worked because he's done some amazing things thereafter. And I'm very excited to see what he does with the new Stargate reboot that is planned for the somewhat near future. Well, that's it for this one. I would say watch this movie. If anything I mentioned, little moving robots, evil puppets, all this stuff, if any of that sounds interesting, Making Contact's a fun watch. You can get the VHS pretty cheap. You can also head over to Kino Lorber and get the Blu-ray, which is absolutely worth it. It's a stunning transfer. And you're going to be all set. So that's it for this mini-sode of Cult and Classic podcast. As always, please rate us, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Send us requests, complaints, things you love, things you hate. Send us your hate mail to frequent contributors at cultandclassicpodcast@gmail.com. You can also write us on Instagram or Facebook. Instagram and Facebook are both at Cult and Classic Podcast or /Cult and Classic Podcast if you're on Facebook. And you can follow me, Nate Wyckoff, on Twitter at Nate Wyckoff. I look forward to hearing from you guys, and I can't wait to bring you another full episode of Cult and Classic Podcast this coming Tuesday.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends, to another mini-sode of Cult and Classic Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about two thematically linked films, one mainstream and one cult. And these mini-sodes are the Friday episodes we bring you between our Tuesday main episodes, where we do little things like film reviews or interviews or product reviews that you might be interested in, stuff like that. And today we're going to start a new trend, which we're going to be doing films in 5. And these are 5-minute reviews. So I'm going to get right into today's, which is 1986's WITCHBOARD. This is kind of in honor of video vixen and actress extraordinaire Tawny Kitaen, who passed away recently, which deeply saddened us. She was considered sort of a kind legend by all. So our condolences to her survivors, and of course to all of us as fans. We miss her terribly, but we want to highlight her awesome work. So we wanted to start with what's one of my personal favorites, WITCHBOARD from 1986. Like I said, now there's a lot of cool stuff to know about this movie. First, this movie was made almost the same time and released almost the same, actually around exactly the same time that her big Whitesnake video was released. She, of course, was a video vixen. She was in a Rat music video, and she'd been and after this in a couple more Whitesnake videos. Very well known for that. You've probably seen her on the car or in headlights, things like that. So that's where she became sort of the sex icon we think of in the 80s and 90s. But like I said, when she was doing her most famous Whitesnake video, this movie was wrapped and they released it about the same time. And apparently the success of or interest in her in the video actually drove the viewership of this movie up, which makes sense because you know, I think a lot of people had heard of her at the time, and so when they became sort of impressed and obsessed with her in this video, they ran out to catch this film. So what is the film about? Well, it's about a Ouija board induced possession. The film is written and directed by Kevin Tenney, credited often in his early films as Kevin S. Tenney. And Kevin Tenney is pretty well known in the cult world for making some really, really great features. This was his first feature film. He did a short in '84 that has gotten some recognition called Book of Joe, but this was his first one 2 years later. He, after this movie, went on to do Night of the Demons in '88, The Cellar in later '88, Witch Trap in '89, Witchboard 2 in '93, Pinocchio's Revenge, for those of you who remember that fun '96 direct-to-video. Tons of movies, absolutely great stuff. And he's got 2 movies in post-production now after taking a quite a long hiatus after the late first decade 2000s. 2009, I think, is where his last completed film was released. So he wrote and directed this film. The film is about a woman and her boyfriend, Tawny Kitaen, and her boyfriend, played by Todd Allen. Todd Allen, well known for some other '80s and '90s fare, but I remember him best from Django Unchained, which we reviewed on this very podcast not too long ago. He played Dollar Bill, one of the smaller but fascinating roles in 2012. To see him on screen again was fun. But he plays sort of the alcoholic boyfriend who is a good guy, but has trouble with his former best friend since childhood, played by Stephen Nichols of Days of Our Lives fame. And they both had dated Tawny Kitaen's character, and Todd Allen ends up being her sort of forever guy. And well, there's tension. Stephen Nichols' character is the one that introduces the Ouija board and a bit of spiritualism, as well as sort of the idea of spirit possession and entrapment, as briefly mentioned in The Exorcist. And that was sort of the inspiration of this film. And it's an interesting mix because you would think that this is just a movie based around demonic possession, but really there's a lot of interpersonal play between Nichols and Allen's characters that makes sort of a bromance form, and the progression is really great, and the acting is really great, and the writing is pretty good. So it sort of elevates it above a lot of Tenney's later fare, which is made for a very different purpose, like The Cellar or Night of the Demons, which is more of an '80s pulp vibe. This one has more of a drama vibe, but that doesn't mean there's not supernatural horror abounding. There are several death scenes. The special effects, while kind of light and they're practical in this movie, are by very well-known special effects person, Tassilo Bauer, who worked on one of my favorites, Killer Clowns from Outer Space in '88 and Nightmare on Elm Street in '84, stepped in along with some assistants to helm the effects in this one. So there's not a lot there, but what is there is well done. And it's just an all-around really good film. It's the kind of film that you would sit down and your friend who's not really a big film person would sit down and be like, ugh, this is just some '80s garbage. And then you start watching it and they're going to get invested because it is well done. It does have good writing. The effects hold. There's a little bit of green screen effect at the end that's kind of goofy, may give you a chuckle, but it's not going to detract from the film overall. And I think it's a great way to remember Tawny Kitaen, to go see this feature. There's also a lot of extras and a lot of background on this film. There were some spooky happenings to people who filmed in the house, which is the primary set for this film. It's the same house that they used in the original Willard film from the '70s, and Waxwork and a bunch of others. And they don't use it as a film set anymore, even though it's still standing, to my knowledge, I believe. So this is kind of a nice time capsule. But anyway, that's it for this film in 5 minutes. I am excited to bring you more of these, and really excited to get back to our main duologies that we cover every Tuesday here in Cult and Classic Podcast. As always, follow us, subscribe, write a review wherever you get your podcasts, and send us your emails, questions, anything like that to cultandclassicpodcast@gmail.com. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Cult and Classic Podcast. And follow me on Twitter, Nate Wyckoff, film critic and comedian, and that is at Nate Wyckoff. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you next time. Play us out, as always, is the Chud with All About Evil. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.